Welcome to Meet the Expert.
Bite size.
A long time ago, we did a comparison of specifically animals affected by PCV2 systemic disease and by means of those lesions that we have just described here. And we did quantitative PCR in serum of those animals. And we observed that at the population level, by means of that particular quantitative PCR used, a level of 10 to the 7 PCV2 genome copies per ml was correlated with the diagnosis of PCV2 systemic disease. But it was at a collective level, not at individual level, because at the individual level we can find 10 to the 7 in animals which are even healthy, and we find less than 10 to the 7 in animals clearly diseased. So this is something very important, because at that time we used a quantitative PCR which we compared with the quantitative PCR of some Danish colleagues. And the PCR of the Danish colleagues yielded 1.2 logs more for the same value that we had ourselves. So if our cutoff was 10 to the 7, for them the cutoff should have been 10 to the 8.2 or 8.4. And with the current techniques that they are used, there's a kit which is widely used all over the world, they are even much more sensitive. So probably that all 10 to the 7 is not anymore a cutoff value for those novel PCRs. And it's not the same to look at the serum than to look at the tissue. Because if you look at the lung, and especially in lymphoid tissues, the quantitative PCR, you have to add 2 or 3 or even 4 logs more in order to have a value that probably correlates with the systemic disease. So from this point of view, I believe that the quantitative PCR is a nice technique that offers you interesting information, but I do not consider it as a good diagnostic tool. It's just an approximative one, and very importantly, nowadays we reach a point in which sometimes it looks like that what I have to do if I have any suspicion of PCV2, do a quantitative PCR. No, the first thing that you have to do is to look at the pigs, examine the animals in the right way, see if you see clinical signs which are really compatible with them, and then please do this histopathological exercise, which sometimes it looks like old-fashioned, but it's really useful for the diagnosis. And if you want to do a quantitative PCR in order to monitor the presence of the virus, even the amount of the virus, this could be a very interesting, let's say, a complementary approach, but it should not be the sole approach, because sometimes you may have some wrong assessment about what's going on, especially when your values that you get is 10 to the 5, 10 to the 6. What does this mean? We are close to the having disease. We are not close to having disease. It may depend on the genetic background of my pigs, etc. There are many variables that do not allow explaining just by quantitative PCR if I'm in front of a problem or not. However, if you are asking me, but it's better to be negative, right? Yes, of course. If the virus is not circulating, it means that the virus is not causing detrimental effects on your pigs. And of course, the lower the viral titer you may have, the better. But the reality is that this is an ubiquitous pathogen which is still circulating in our farms, and the point is to try to protect from a clinical point of view as your first objective. So quantitative PCR is useful, but take care on that.